Recently, we got a surprise announcement that Sony is releasing its own mini console, which is pretty exciting because it's the PlayStation Classic. It comes out on December 3rd. To talk about the PlayStation Classic, it includes 2 controllers and it's $150 down under. I'm Mitch, your moderator, and joining me to discuss this and more is Russell and Jordan.
It's not the DualShock controller though, so this is the non-analog,
No
non-rumble specific version.
It's the cheap
the replicas
one.
of the original PlayStation 1.
It's a cheap one that could fit and include 2 for this price. So we know what 5 out of the 20 games are, which the 5 are Final Fantasy VII, obvious one. Jumping Flash. What's Jumping Flash? Do you know what that is, Russell?
The only reason I even know this game is because when the PS3 was releasing the PS1 classics, it was one of the games they released. But other than that fact, I wouldn't be putting it in the top 20 PS1, classics, what's represent the core lineup. That would not be on my list now.
Clearly, someone at Sony is a big fan of Jumping Flash, and someone else is a big fan of this one, as we know, because it's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer. Type 4. Interesting choice. We'll talk about why it's a bit weird later, but I think you already know because Gran Turismo, come on. We've got Tekken 3, and we've got Wild Arms. So they're the 5 we know.
There's 2 absolute picks on there, like Tekken 3 had to be on this set, as did Final Fantasy 7. The other 3, Wild Arms is also a pretty good pick, but I don't think a necessary pick. But the other 2 are kind of weird, especially when there's so many other classic PS1 games.
There are so many other good games on this console. It's kind of weird to be buying this thing, which I think I've bought it. Don't know about any of you, but...
Oh, until they actually show what I'm getting, I wouldn't be putting a cent on it, because for all we know, we might get really bad games, or we might get really good games.
Yeah, or you might get a Spider-Man Collector's Edition, where you get a statue where he's on a pile of junk. Wouldn't that be unfortunate?
Spoilers!
It would be unfortunate, but it's just interesting to see features that maybe were possible, and they just confirmed that wasn't the case. Like, there is no trophy support, there is no online support. There's no way of adding more games to this set, so it is a in-base 20 games. That is what you're getting. There is nothing else beyond that point. And
so obviously we need to have a big discussion about what are the best 20 PlayStation 1 games that definitely deserve their spot, because here at Optional Extra, we're a big fan of a certain Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, which just got a PS4 port with Rondo of Blood, but in terms of definitive PS1 games, you have to have Castlevania, Symphony of the Night. There's no way against it.
Well, yeah, it's just... it has to be on there. Will Konami allow it? I certainly hope so, especially considering the Rondo of Blood collaboration trophy.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign, so...
Yeah.
I guess one of the biggest things before we get to any other games is if it's available on like the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 3, what's the point of having it on something separate? Castlevania is a good one because it isn't on that, but other ones...
Well, it's
about to be, and you can get it on Xbox One backwards compatibility, so that is available in other places. But I think if you're making the console that's meant to show you what the best games of the PS1 were, regardless of remakes or re-releases or whatever, you need these definitive games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, clearly a definitive PS1 game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it needs to be on there. I do agree with Jordan that there's a problem. There's going to be a problem with a lot of games that should be in this collection where it's like they have done better versions of them. Crash, Spyro, like that has that problem. But at the same time, it should
Resident
be in
Evil is another one. They've remastered it already and they're remaking a second one, so why would they put the original on this console?
But I think the argument there is also like, how definitive is Resident Evil for the PS1? That is the argument I expect to be making a lot.
Yeah, and I think Castlevania's up there, and the fact that I think a lot of people would put that probably on the best games ever made, I think it should be on this list.
There's some games that I played on the PlayStation 1 that I would really want to be on this, but I know deep down they're not going to be on it, like, 101 Dalmatians or other Disney games, because they're just super fun to play when you're a kid.
Make the argument of why you think it should be on there, but...
I mean, 101 Dalmatians, it's like you get to play as some Dalmatians going around collecting bones, digging,
You've really
climbing
sold
stuff, going through Piccadilly,
But, Jordan, let me ask you a question. If you think they're defining games on PlayStation, does 101 Dalmatians come up in that list?
Well, for me as a kid, it was one of the ones I played, so yes.
Okay.
So Jordan as a kid is wrong.
You go the nostalgia aspect, sure. 100 Wild Dalmatians for you, Jordan, as would, I guess, in like Hercules and those kind of games.
Yeah, instead of just having a PlayStation Classic console, why not just have a Disney console? Done.
Yeah, I mean, that's another option. But it's one of those things where it's like when Sony's releasing all their old PS1 classics and whatnot for the PS3, I'm pretty confident 100 Wild Dalmatians on there. Could be wrong, but I don't think
I'm hoping it's on there, but it's not going to be on there. I know deep down.
Yeah, so I would recommend picking another one to put in the 15 we need to complete this.
Well, if they're wanting someone that's a mascot that's iconic to PlayStation, wouldn't you go Papa the Rapper?
Parappa the Rapper.
Parappa the Rapper? I mean, you would. Yeah, he is definitely like one of those classic games.
Pretty niche.
But the case I would make is the same problem you have with quite a few of these is that they remade it in HD, and it wasn't well received. So... Would you put it on the collection? I don't know. And it's also very short. It's a very short game.
Yeah, so it's like, is that the nail in the coffin? Because, I mean, it is a PS1 classic, and, like, am I thinking, like, is it definitive? I hadn't heard of Parappa the Rapper until I started watching Easy Allies stuff, because, shout out to Carl Bossman.
I'm a big fan of Parappa the Rapper, the game I played heaps as a kid. I know all the songs inside and out, every single one, because I played it so often.
He sung one on a video too. If you want to check out that, it's about Tataku.
That's true.
He does a little rap.
That's true. I definitely wanted to be on the list, but even looking at the list we've kind of got in front of us right now, I'm going, I don't know if it cuts with the 15 we have, if it would be in that list simply because they remade it, and it looks better. It sounds better.
Let's cut to the point. Metal Gear Solid should be on there.
Metal Gear Solid. If you got Castlevania, Metal Gear's got to be on there. Simple as that.
So you can get Metal Gear Solid 2, I think at 3 and 4 in a collection, but it didn't have the original one, so.
Well, different console. It didn't have it. I think that's a lie. I think it did have
one
it
of them.
countries.
The main one didn't have it. One of the others did. I mean, for the most part, you can't get it on a modern system. No. You can't get it on the PS3.
It's one of those. This is one of those consoles. I want games that you can't really get anywhere else.
And they haven't remade it. And Metal Gear's an absolutely amazing, genre-defining game that impacted so many in this industry. It's probably one of the best PS1 games. I would say, True Twin Snakes, I forgot about that one, but I don't really count it because they wasn't Kojima directed and all that kind of aspect. So, Metal Gear has to be on this list. So, to me, it would be the top pick, absolutely. Metal Gear needs to be on there.
Yeah, so we've got 2, 13. Got a good list here of some really good classics.
I think one that should definitely be on it as well that you'd probably both agree is Crash Team Racing. They've had Crash Bandicoot rebooted 1, 2, and 3, but they didn't bring back in the racing.
No, because they knew it was inferior to Mario Kart.
I don't know. I really do like Crash Team Racing. It was more in the line of like Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64. It's great. It's different, and more importantly than I think all of these, it's a mascot defining figure for Sony that isn't been made better with the remakes. So I think Crash Team Racing would be a really good pick.
And it's a good one for those 2 controllers because like Symphony of the Night and Metal Gear Solid, the only thing for Metal Gear Solid is swapping the ports.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, that's multiplayer. You're right. That's 2 controllers. Crash Team Racing absolutely should be on that list.
Yeah. So, in about Crash Team Racing, it's like that multiplayer game, and then you kind of think, what else is multiplayer that will take use of those 2 controllers? And then you think other racing games like Gran Turismo or Wipeout. And it's just like when you think of PS1 and definitive racing games, like if you don't include Gran Turismo, you've no idea what you're talking about.
The biggest problem is that they already have a racing game.
Yeah.
You don't want like multiple games of the same
But it's Ridge
genre.
Racer, Jordan. Ridge Racer.
It's disappointing that it was Ridge Racer because it's like if it was like Twisted Metal or Wipeout or one of those, which is very distinctly different. But Gran Turismo and Ridge Racer are both kind of more serious driving simulators games.
Yeah,
but
one's better
at the
than
same
the
time,
other.
Gran Turismo is one of their best-selling franchises ever in Sony's history.
Full stop.
And it's super impactful for the console. I think Gran Turismo should be on the list. And even though Ridge Racer, it will overshadow Ridge Racer, is the aspect it'll have.
It's almost like they should have just picked Gran Turismo instead of Ridge Racer.
That's what I think. It's just like, if you see Gran Turismo and Ridge Racer next to each other, you're going to pick Gran Turismo. You're not going to pick Ridge Racer.
But, multiplayer... better game. More. I mean, Ridge Racer. I personally didn't play I think Ridge Racer 4 is the one they're including. But just on face value, like Gran Turismo is the franchise that Sony has been like. It's been their best seller from most of their platforms. So Gran Turismo should be on this list.
Yeah, and it's like thinking about Wipeout. It's like that also had a remaster. It's like a lot of these have had redoings, and it's just like there is one on this list that we've done a pretty comprehensive video on that is getting a remake. When that is, we don't know, but. Does Medieval deserve a spot?
It is another one of their...
Sort of iconic, sort of like he's a
People-
bit packed with the
iconic sort of
rappery and like
things.
niche-ish.
There's a couple of games in that kind of more niche, but still iconic to the PlayStation platform, and Medieval is absolutely one of those games. But the problem with Medieval, it's not that big a problem, but it's the fact that they dropped the analog support, which means you don't have the ability to control the camera with an analog stick. But at the same time, I think it would be a good pick because you also, when you're building a collection of games, you want them to feel different and look different. And Medieval not only fits that criteria, but it doesn't have any other competition really on the PS1 that is similar.
That's similar
and
to that,
which is
yeah.
itself a very good thing. Yeah. Just the fact alone that they're doing some kind of remake, the exact context has not been elaborated on since PSX, but the very fact that it's in their mindset, I would not be surprised to find out Medieval is one of the ones.
It'd be a good way to bring
this.
it back into the spotlight.
Yeah, just real quick. And it's an IP they own, like, flat out. They don't need
Exactly.
to ask anyone.
It's a lot easier to do that. Yeah, just pick
Yeah,
one
rather
where you
than, like, Symphony or Metal Gear. It's just like, we have to ask Konami, where Medieval is just, like, internal.
Do you
Makes it
think
easier.
the reason why they only showed 5 games is because some of the games, like Medieval, if they're going to put it on it, they're still trying to work out how to change the control scheme to work for it?
Well, the control scheme
Well,
did work for it.
It did support it. It just, as not most games, but quite a lot of games did, they added extra functionality for the DualShock control. Metal Gear had, like, vibrations for Psychomantis section. Like, there were extra things that they could do. The only game I recall that absolutely cannot be in this collection, and even though it should be, in my opinion, is Ape Escape, because not only was it an excellent game, but it was the justification for the analog stick, and because of that justification, it does not work without it. So it will not work in this set, which is a shame in itself. The next one I think of is Resident Evil, and that Resident Evil had 3 games on the PS1, well, a little bit more if you count, like, Director's Cut and that kind of thing.
There's one that hasn't got much love.
Yeah, and Resident Evil 3 is that list. And Resident Evil 3 Nemesis in itself is a really good game. They really, in a lot of ways, it was kind of like building on what Resident Evil 2 had done and be more technically impressive in how Nemesis could break through walls and that kind of thing, and something that chased you throughout the whole game. And even though I think Resident Evil 2 is probably the one I'd pick out of all the 3 initially, because they're remaking, it's going to be way better. Resident Evil 3 would be the one that we should pick.
See, I agree with that. The other biggest issue with it, though, is if you're having one like that, or like Harry Potter, sometimes it's almost best to just do a remaster of them instead of having...
Well, I think what kills Harry Potter for them even having a chance is licensing. Like, flat out, like, who owns that game? Nobody really knows. So it's just Resident Evil 3 has a clear and obvious owner.
I can't remember if it was EA. Harry Potter might have been EA. I don't know if they own it. I don't know who owns that license. Maybe Warner Brothers, probably. I mean, they have the movies.
J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think Harry Potter isn't definitive enough a PlayStation game for me to think it should be on this list. More serious. Now, the biggest one for me is Spyro. Do we put a Spyro on there? Because there's only 3 for the PS1, and all of them are about to be re-released very soon.
See, I think that'd be a waste of, like, if you only got 20 games and you're going to release it, there's no point having it on this console.
The argument there is that, like, when you think PS1, I'm thinking Spyro. I'm thinking Crash Bandicoot. It's just like, they are the things that jump to mind. And I think if you want this to be the classic PlayStation, you need to have a Spyro. And I think probably Spyro 1, I guess, is the real
If you were going to have a Spyro, it'd be number 1.
Yeah, I think just for simplicity, do the first one. I think if you didn't pick the first one, 3 would be a good case because there's so many new abilities and characters in that one.
Definitely.
But I think because this is almost like a significance placement, I think Spyro 1 is the better pick.
Speaking of games that they recently released or planning to release as well, do you think the original Spider-Man will be on this?
Sony do probably on the right.
It's certainly an interesting one. How many have we got right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
We've got
So we're only
7.
like halfway there. I don't know. It's one of those ones where, like a lot of these games, of course, they got way better later. Do I think when I see Spider-Man PS1, do I think like that is an iconic game to that platform? Kinda. I mean, I don't know. Spider-Man might be a good pick, honestly.
But is Spider-Man 2 maybe a better game though?
It is, but it's not on a PS1 game.
I mean, would they try to market more on Spider-Man, seeing that it's been out recently?
It's very true. Its relevance right now. I think Spider-Man's probably a pretty good pick, actually.
The other one similar to that as well, while we're on that topic of new games, is what about the original Tomb Raider?
Yeah, one of those have to be on there. It was such a massive cult hit. They sold incredibly well. At least I think 2 and 3 sold the best. But which one to pick is hard. They got better as they went along for the most part.
I did a bit of research on it. recently, and Tomb Raider 1 was the one that was the most about tombs and that sort of thing. Number 2 and 3 were rushed. So out of the 3, I'd go number 1 because it's like the most.
I would be going between 1 and the fourth one because the fourth one was more a personal story and it was all Egyptian tombs.
However,
1's more iconic. No one forgets that T-Rex scene. So I think put Tomb Raider 1 in there.
the other thing with number 4 you got to remember as well is that at the time they were wanting to kill off the franchise, so they secretly put an ending in to kill Tomb Raider, Lara.
They did, yeah.
So that made a lot of people angry. So I don't think they would put that back in there.
Yeah, speaking of Crystal Dynamics, they made some good games back then, and what about Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver? Does that probably deserve a spot? I would say so. Like, in terms of iconic games, like, it's different, it's out there, it's like vampires. It did things so in advance that it took years for games to even do some of what Legacy of Kain did.
It's one of those games like Shadow of the Colossus that I've heard so much about, but took forever to play it. So if it was on the PlayStation 1, I'd be like, yeah, I might as well give that a try.
I would definitely play it if it was on there.
Considering Final Fantasy 7s are represented, I assume Square Enix owns the original Legacy of Kain rights, not just the current rights. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's an easy get for them, and one that I believe would be a very good pick for the collection to round out different things.
Definitely. And to speak about different things, I know we've got a proper JRPG on there being Final Fantasy 7. What about more one that's sort of been forgotten, but its legacy certainly lives on, which is Xenogears, which in terms of JRPGs, it was doing mechs and all kinds of stuff. And
it is one of those things where it's like that game really does stand out at the time. Admittedly, as much as I loved it, I didn't like it as much as Final Fantasy 8 or 9 or 7, but I seriously doubt they're going to add Final Fantasy 8 and 9
No,
onto
I
this
think
list.
you're not going to get another mainline Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so if they add any RPG, I mean, they already have with Wild Arms, but any
That's
more
true.
RPGs, Xenogears is a really good pick. I think it's got a lot more going for it in a different way to those games. So I think Xenogears would be a really nice pick and a often forgotten pick, which is kind of the next one I really suggest. So Xenogears, I would say I'm all for, and Oddworld is the other one that I'd be like super for, because I really do feel like that world, they defined something so unique, so different, and really made like a creative storytelling aspect in a 2D plane that for the most part had it not been done up to that point. Like 2D platforming games with a story and like a world and all unique, all brand new, different aspects to it. It was incredibly creative and really good in its own right. And I feel like that would be an excellent pick to have these different choices.
Certainly different, and I certainly think it's kind of like, it's weird to be talking about the PS1. There's a lot of games here that have been brought forward, but there's so much left in the past. But Oddworld has definitely kept its mark ongoing, and it would be good to show, like, for the classic, that where Oddworld comes from, where was it that it originated from, and to put on the PS1 classic would be a good thing to do that.
Just very quickly, was Earthworm Jim on the PlayStation 1?
No, it wasn't.
No, okay. Pretty much got almost 15, but there's two that we haven't really talked about yet that would be kind of cool to see on it. They're both they're a little bit similar, but not similar. You've got Croc, which is like a 3D platformer with the crocodile, or you've got the original Rayman, which is a 2D platformer.
You've also got Gex.
And Gex, that's the other one I'm thinking of. One of those at least has to be on there.
Not Croc, would be my quick argument.
Which one is the best? Rayman is the best on that list. However, there's two that are 3D platformers and one that is a 2D platformer. It's not surprising that at that time the 2D platformers were the best versions of them for the most part. Mario 64 was probably the only exception, not a PlayStation game. But yeah, I still go Rayman's the best out of those three. I think Croc is probably more PlayStation, if I think PlayStation. Gex to me is, for whatever reason, a 64 game. At least I think like Nintendo when I think Gex. And Rayman I think PC. So, like, if I was thinking PlayStation, I would go with Croc, but I think Rayman is the best game on that list, and the one that people... If you're trying to sell a product, Rayman is far more recognizable, I think, than Croc and Gex are.
Definitely. I think,
That's true.
I know, you know who Rayman is, that you say the word, it's like, if you go the Rabbids, that's the first thing you think of, and the second thing you think is they came from something actually good, which was Rayman.
And they're still making games for Rayman too, so...
Two left. Well...
Exclusive Club is coming to an end.
I think... for a unique genre that none of these games represent, but also have very big IP tied to it, is Final Fantasy Tactics. And I think it not only is an excellent game in its own right, but it's a game that doesn't have any representation in all the picks we have, where it's a turn-based, RPG, XCOM, Valkyria Chronicles, like any of those type games.
The big issue with that is, though, then you're going to have 2 Final Fantasy games on this.
It's not a problem because they're so drastically different. And Final Fantasy games don't tie together in any way other than possibly like creature representation, like Bahamut or Chocobos or whatever. Other than that, they're pretty much self-contained, separate stories.
And it's a very different game. I think Final Fantasy Tactics is a game a lot of people long to have again, and I think in terms of like definitive PS1 games, I think Final Fantasy Tactics definitely can fit that bill. It's just like, now we have one choice of the remaining PS1 games.
One choice.
We could go all out there and just go with Digimon World. It was like a really, really hard game. Digimon hasn't really been around for a little while. Go all nostalgic on the 90s.
You could go Yu-Gi-Oh! With the same breath, but I'm thinking of like what licensing and what they already have in terms of like if they're getting Crash and the Spyro, and I assume most likely those two will happen. I think they should happen. Why not chuck Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in there too? I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is an excellent game. I think 3 was better when they improved on it and they built on it down the line. But I think 2 in itself is still a really good game, one that I recall playing so often as a kid. And Activision being the ownership shouldn't be too difficult to chuck that in as well, especially considering how much of a disaster the most recent live
Number
that game
5 was.
Return. And the other big deal is multiplayer. You want to justify the 2 controllers, and Tony Hawk's going to bring that into the 3
and like we've hardly justified it so far.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, you've got the racing games at that point. You've got the like a skateboard game. You've got like the serious story games. It kind of has a bit of everything, at that point.
Certainly does, and that makes a really good varied console with, a heap of different games.
So with our picks, Mitch, what's the full list reading off?
So the list is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Crash Team Racing, Final Fantasy Tactics, Gran Turismo, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, Medieval, Metal Gear Solid.
1. The original, right?
Yeah, the original. Oddworld, Rayman, Resident Evil 3, Spider-Man, Spyro 1, Tomb Raider 1, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and Xenogears to round off the list.
Plus the other 5.
Plus the Final Fantasy 7, Ridge Racer, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms. That is what the definitive PlayStation should be, because they're the definitive games in our opinion.
Like that list is very strong. If you got those, not all of them are like the cream of the crop, the best for the platform, but it's a bit of diversity and certainly all good experiences in their own right.
It basically shows you what the PS1 is all about.
Which is what
diversity.
You want.
Yeah,
that's just going to be the matter of how many are we actually going to get right.
Yeah, find out when it gets announced.
I'm sure some of them are going to be spot on. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some weird ones.
I still think they're going to put 101 Dalmatians on there.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, Jordan. I'm sure 101
You wait. They'll put it on there. Or they might even surprise you and put 102 Dalmatians on.
Oh my god, that would certainly shock me. It's just like, this is what I hope. Like, there's a lot of great games that I've just said, which, I would be very happy with my purchase if this is true. And I think everyone who wants a PS1 to be as, like, showing what that console was and what legacy it brought and how it lives on, because a lot of these games live on in remakes, re-releases, but some of them have been lost to time, and hopefully this brings them back. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one, hopefully. Goodbye.